note of all the things he can do, and here's a few of them. He's been a tarot reader for 10 years. He also is well versed in numerology and something called matrix energetics, and astrology as well, isn't it?
Not really astrology.
No? Oh, okay. He's been a member of the Theosophical Society for 5 years, and he's a regular lecturer and workshop leader here and elsewhere. And his talk tonight has an intriguing title, Jung and the Tarot, Our Journey Through the Underworld, and the subtitle is The Tarot of Physics. So I'm sure we're all looking forward to a very interesting talk tonight. So please welcome Clemens.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everybody for a lovely turnout. Tonight's talk is called Jung and the Tarot, Our Journey Through the Underworld, and it has a subtitle, The Tarot of Physics. So that immediately is going to open out the talk for us tonight, because I want to treat a very abstract theme, and it's the theme of being. And that really is the subject of tonight's talk. Deeper than Jung, deeper than tarot, deeper even than quantum physics, I really would like us to focus on what we mean by being, and whether there is such a thing as a path to being. Because Jung, great analytical psychologist that he was, founded his psychology on what he called the process of individuation. And that was a search for wholeness, which was each person finding ways to become all they can be, to manifest their full potential. There may be some Jungians in the audience tonight. Can I see a show of hands if there are any? Yes? There's one or two Jungians tonight. Okay. So Jung was familiar with the tarot, amongst the myriad other things, and he actually wrote a few notes on each card, but he didn't actually write any book on it. I think he was far too busy, but he did approve of it, and he also suggested it could be used in therapy. Tonight we're not going to be looking at the therapeutic use of the tarot. We are going to be looking at what the tarot can tell us about this subject, our subject tonight being. Now, Leonora Carrington, she was the lover of Max Ernst during the Spanish Civil War, great artist. She said the tarot is a chameleon. And you can basically, it changes form, it changes shape, you can see anything you want to see in the tarot according to what you project into it. That's how I make a living as a tarot reader. I give readings, people come to me, they ask questions, they have an issue, I lay out the cards, and the cards will unfailingly give me the answer, or an answer that can help that person. It's not necessarily the answer to all their problems, but it provides a very valuable insight. For tonight's talk, I'm using a very newly reconstructed deck of tarot cards called the Jodorowsky pack, and this is the accompanying book on the pack, and it's based on the Tarot de Marseille. Now, has anybody ever heard of Jodorowsky or the Tarot of Marseille? Right, okay, yeah, a few people have. I'm surprised and I'm very gratified, because most people in this Western world nowadays, they use another pack called the Rider-Waite, and that is about, it's nearly 100 years old, but it's actually a quite, it's a kind of distortion. It's a reinterpretation of the original tarot pack, and I didn't want to use it because I feel that it would take us off at the subject of our talk if I use that pack. This pack is the basis. The pack I'm using tonight, here's the box, Tarot de Marseille Jodorowsky version. This pack is the reconstructed Tarot de Marseille, and it is the basis for, here we are, thank you, I was looking for that, Jung and the Tarot. Okay, now this is a very well-known book. It's the leading authority on this whole subject of the link between Carl Jung, the psychologist, and the mystical vision portrayed in the 22 cards of the major arcana of the tarot. I read this book very thoroughly, I can tell you, in preparation for this talk, and then I threw it away, or I put it to one side, because I felt I didn't want to just rehash what was in this book. I wanted to give you an original presentation based on my own researches down another direction. Okay, so first of all, or rather at this stage, I want to ask, how many people here consider themselves to be on some kind of spiritual path? Oh my goodness. I hope I'm not going to shatter all your expectations and wonderful hopes and dreams tonight, because it could turn out to be quite controversial, because this whole subject of being, immensely mysterious and abstract though it is, really raises a question, which is there such a thing as a spiritual path? Yeah? Can there be one when we're considering something as it's the word luminous, as being, and it doesn't seem to preoccupy or worry too many people these days, but I think it is worth asking, and we'll run with this question all through the talk. A lot of people who do involve themselves in spirituality, they do things like meditation, like Eastern spiritual practices. It's become something of a growth industry. Buddhism in the last 20, 30 years has become very popular. Various types of spiritual psychology like Gestalt, Jungian, analytical psychology. All of these paths, and even like in the center we have a figure contorting himself in some kind of Tai Chi pose, Qigong. These are very, very common now in the West. And it's all revolving around this whole process of what Jung called individuation, coming into our wholeness, or what is also known these days as enlightenment. There's even a magazine called What is Enlightenment? So, I mean, I myself, I've been fully involved in this whole thing. I've been to Pune in India. I've sat at the feet of film showings of the great Guru Osho or Rajneesh, and always talking about spirituality and about our being, rather than who we are as doers, but rather what is beyond all that, what is beyond the doer. Such a thing as consciousness, apparently. And then when we get down to consciousness, we have to ask ourselves, well, what is consciousness? And again, is there a path to it? One of the books, or rather, actually I met him, if I have the book still here somewhere, one of the authors of one of my books, that's right, is Tony Parsons. Tony Parsons has written a book called The Open Secret, which is a very wonderful, simple, deeply profound meditation on the subject of being. And I met him around about 20 years ago at a coffee, at a kind of tea party. He just walked up to me with a big smile, and he just seemed ever so happy and ever so present. And I kept asking myself, to what do I owe this pleasure? To have this man with his big smile coming up, totally interested in anything I had to say to him. That's how simple and how friendly he came across, how compassionate. He's written this wonderful book, and he really does throw into question this whole idea of there being anything that we need to do to access the state of being. It's very interesting what he says. I used to believe that people actually became enlightened, and that the event was similar to someone winning the jackpot in a national lottery. Once the prize had been won, the beneficiary would thereafter be guaranteed permanent bliss. I now see that there is no one and nothing to be enlightened. Enlightenment simply is. It cannot be achieved or won like some trophy. All and everything is oneness. And all that we do is get in its way by trying to find it. So that immediately throws cat among the pigeons for any suggestion that we can actually do something to realize what is our essential essence. Jung was very much in the opposite camp, and his psychology has been considerably bolstered by mythologists, people who lecture and write about myths and legends. Here we have an illustration of Parsifal, which is one of the great stories of the hero's search, and very much central to the Gnostic tradition, the idea of Parsifal embarking on a search for treasure that is hard to find. One of the books that I researched for this talk was actually very much about Parsifal's journey, and the journey supposedly of everybody here is called Tarot, and the journey of the hero. And I'm not going to rubbish it, far from it, because that is the subtitle of my talk, the Underworld journey. But it is something that we're going to, as we go through the talk, keep asking ourselves, is there a journey? But if there is a journey, okay, well, let's go with the journey through the tarot and see where it takes us and what we can learn from it. Jung said man has two aims. The first is the begetting of children, protecting the brood, acquisition of money, social position. What he was saying is that there are two stages to this notional journey. The first stage occupies us the first half of our life, up to about the age of 30, 35, 40. Thereafter, he said, we kind of change direction, and instead of going out there and trying to get things and make a living and all those sort of things, we turn inwards. We turn from the journey of doing or creation, self-creation, we turn inwards to being or self-surrender. That occupied the second half of life. And it is something that is reflected also in Tibetan mandalas. This is the Tibetan mandala of life, I believe it's called, mandala of life. And it shows a small circle right at the center, which symbolizes ourselves as small children or babies, newly born, in our pristine innocence. Around that, in a rigid square, we have the world that we live in now, the material world, the world of time and space. And that can be equated to everything that we do or everything that we don't do as we go through life, doing and being. And then beyond that, we have a larger circle, the circle of wholeness, which is the goal of the Jungian journey, the process of individuation. And that is to come into all that we are. And what I'm going to do, I hope that nobody quarrels with me, I'm going to equate enlightenment with wholeness, with unity, with consciousness, with eternal spirit, with infinite unmanifest potential. All of these terms are going to be the same thing. I hope you can all take that. Yeah. At least take it as long as the talk lasts. I'm not here to convert anybody. But yes, I'm going to equate wholeness with unity and also with enlightenment, just to keep everything really simple. Now, the tarot has its own Parsifal in the form of the hero who is called the Fool. And he's somebody, he's here and he's there. Okay, that's the Fool. The Fool has a card that has no number on it because he is the one who's making the journey, and he is each one of us seated on our chairs tonight. And he's eager, he or she is eager, enthusiastic, open for learning, very curious, and can move anywhere he or she likes around the experiences that are going to come up as he or she goes through life. Here we are, here are the experiences on the journey. Okay? Now we've got two lines of cards. The top line, starting from the right, is the line of doing, whose leader, whose leitmotif, if you will, is the magician on the far right. Then the second line is the line that corresponds to the second half of life, which is the line of, we could call it the line of being or non-doing. And that can also correspond to being with a capital B, for the purposes of this talk tonight. Being with a small b, not doing anything, allowing things to happen. Being with a capital B, consciousness, unity, wholeness, the abstract, the eternal mystery. At the end of the major arcana, he's gone through all this travelling, this experiencing of life's archetypal situations, and before one arrives at very happy, very extended happy ending, the return. 3 cards of complete purity, happiness and fulfillment, which show that despite all of life's travails, all of its tribulations, all of its hardships and its tests and so on, there is a happy ending for all of us. So, because I believe that all ancient stories and myths, they always had this happy ending. Reminds me, has anybody seen Lord of the Rings? This very extended, long, happy, fulfilling ending at the end of the Lord of the Rings in the film. So we have the triumphal return. That is the journey. Here is the masculine part of the journey, which we're not going to look at in detail tonight. There is not enough time. And it is presided over by the magician, le pateleur in French, who is the incarnation of creative force, readiness for action, playfulness, with illusion. He's a magician. He's not simply a constructor, a builder. And Tarot seems to be saying something here, that the mystics are saying, that life isn't all that we take it to be, that perhaps it's all just, was it Prospero who said it's all a dream, it's all conjured out of an illusion. Anyway, he's the conjurer, and he starts us off. He's the beginning force on the first half of our life, and of the major arcana. Sorry, there are 22 cards altogether in this major arcana, symbolizing our life as a whole. The second part of the journey, if you can still stay with the idea of a journey, is presided over by the High Priestess. It's called the feminine path of being. She incarnates union with the divine, passive receptive gestation, virginal purity. She's a very sedate, a very grounded, a very physical woman, at the same time very inwardly focused. Very much in the position of a nun, for example, the Virgin Mary, any woman who is devout, holy, devoted to the life of the spirit, not going out there into the outside world, but keeping one's own counsel, keeping one's own company. She doesn't appear in the second half of the journey, in these 9 cards in the second half, but she's the second card of the first journey after the magician. So these 2 cards, the magician and the high priestess, they're like leitmotifs for the 2 parts of the journey. These 2 parts of the journey have been likened to the journey of the sun, as we see it going around the planet. It starts on the far right, the sun rises in the east, it rises up to full heaven with the lovers, very, very optimistic and full of shining light, falling in love for the first time, and then it comes down and sets on the other half of the equator, on the other side of the equator. It sets with the 10th card, which is the very appropriately named Wheel of Fortune. It's like a wheel, it's a turning journey, and that is the turning point, is the Wheel of Fortune. And then this second half of the journey starts, and it's equivalent to a night journey over sea, the journey that the sun takes while we're asleep, the hidden journey, the journey through the night, the journey through the underworld. it's also a kind of balancing act, this entire journey of light and dark, which is the constant theme of the Tao. Tao moves in circles, always flowing back to Tao, moving in circles. Both the Tao and the Tao have this in common, that they're constantly balancing opposites. The opposites of life, of being and doing, of light and dark, of movement and stillness, and always keeping them in balance. That's what our material life is all about. Here is the at the centre, the wheel of fortune, showing the cycle. Life is a cycle of doing and being, of events happening, and for me it's a kind of confirmation that there is something to this idea of a circle, circular action in the tower with this wheel of fortune. Now, the wheel of fortune comes, if it comes in our life, and it does, usually it often kind of marks what could be called a midlife crisis. I've had so many of them myself. And what it follows is the card of the Hermit. It's very interesting. Now, the Hermit is the last card of the path of doing. And isn't it interesting that on the path of doing, you come to a stage where you feel like becoming a hermit. I think this is so true. You just feel like you've reached the end of the journey, it's time to take a sabbatical, time to get rid of all one's possessions, to get rid of all the idea of trying to achieve something, and go on a search. And I know people who've done this, they've taken a sabbatical, and they wanted to go off and find some other meaning to life. I think many people here can identify with a time in life when you feel, what is the meaning? What is the point of it all? What am I here for? What am I driving at? And it's this impulse which in the tarot leads the fool, if you will, to become a hermit, to say, this is the end of all my stressful effort of doing. I want to find something deeper and more meaningful. And then crossing over into the side of life to do with being. Same thing happened in mythology with the daughter of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter. This was a goddess whose daughter was abducted by Hades and literally taken down into the underworld. And that was a rather significant change or turning point in the life of both mother and daughter. For the daughter, because she had to give up a cosy life being mothered all the time, had to become the wife of Hades, the ruler of the underworld. And for Demeter, she had to give up living through a projection of herself in her daughter and find her own daughter within. So again, it was a turning inwards for her, for both mother and daughter in that myth. So here we are. This is the first card that we're going to look at tonight in detail. And as I said, it's the beginning card of the path of being, and it's the turning point in this whole process from going from doing to being. I do want to make it clear that there is not, I'm not saying there's a particular day in our life, like at the age of 35 3/4 or 42, when we suddenly abandon all our doings and become holy meditators or monks or nuns. That's not the case. This can happen at any time in life. Each card in the major arcana is like a microcosm for the process as a whole. So we can have an experience of the wheel of fortune any day of our life. We can have a feeling that we're experiencing a high, but how long is this going to last before it becomes a downward trajectory and a low? And doesn't this seem to keep repeating in my life, that feeling of highs and followed by lows, going down and going up? So this can happen any day. It's a turning point in life or just in a day. It means an attainment of a higher understanding. I'll come to that in a moment. It's a recognition that life is really just a treadmill. We keep doing things and hoping to achieve something, and we achieve something, and then we want to go on and achieve something else, according to whatever our desires are. And I'm sure none of us are any stranger to desires and dreams. And what's interesting, when we look at the card itself, we have two animals that seem to be propelling the wheel. And in my interpretation, these animals are chasing after something. They're chasing after their dreams and their hopes and their desires. And it's all this activity of chasing and running and striving to get, which is actually keeping the wheel rotating. Because we don't see the hand on the handle of the wheel. Perhaps there is a hand, but it's a mystery, but we don't see it. So it's about seeing the futility of intentional effort, and perhaps, if we realise at this early stage that there is no need to do anything, that we can just be. And I see this in the figure at the top of the wheel, which is some kind of sphinx holding a sword of the mind, sword of wisdom. And here we have our first encounter in the Arcana with a miracle, because this path, the path of being, is also the path of miracles. That's the way I see it. Each card reveals some kind of mystery or miracle. Here we have the figure on the top, sitting on top of the wheel in a very precarious position, and yet he's staying in the same place. He's not going around in the wheel. It's rather a nonsensical, illogical part of the drawing, or illustration. If it's real life, it's a miracle that he's not turning around. In fact, he seems to be beyond this whole process of cyclical change. Perhaps it's because what Ramtha said. Ramtha is one of the authorities I'll be quoting tonight, a very spiritual, enlightened being who's being channeled by a lady called Joseph Knight. He says it is the attitude toward life that allows its cycles of change to seem circular. So, what is our attitude? Is our attitude closed? One thing happening after another? We have to get something? We have to go keep on doing that? Or is it open? Does it allow anything to be experienced? A more open attitude. Richard Bartlett, I'll tell you about him in a moment, he says, in a closed system, one pole can't exist without the other. In an open system, that is not true. That is where miracles operate. They operate outside our normal reference or reality. And the way I see this card, we've got both the closed system, the wheel, and all of us on the treadmill of doing, and you've got somebody outside of that in an open system, both connected to the wheel and yet outside of it. Now, I want to check up on when we have to take a break. But
half an hour.
But still half an hour. Yeah. Right, okay. So, now, we're really getting underway now with becoming acquainted with the qualities of simply being. And a couple of cards follow now of the 9 that we're going to look at, which look at qualities of being, perhaps, if it can be described. And this card here, La Force, is a lady holding, clenching or touching the jaws of a very ferocious-looking lion. And it's called Strength in the English tarot pack. It's quite a simple card. There's no background. The focus is entirely on the woman and the power that she is wielding to subdue this quite ferocious beast, this animal. It's quite ambiguous, like all the cards in this particular deck. It's quite ambiguous whether that beast is our own wild animalistic nature, or is it something outside of us. Whatever it is, she's being wholly successful in subduing it. Using what? What is she doing to subdue that beast? What would everybody here think?
Muzzling it.
Sorry?
Muzzling it in a way.
She's kind of muzzling it, yes. What quality do you think is she embodying as she's being it? Well, This card has been said to symbolize the power of love, which is greater than any other power, no matter what it is. Simply by loving sensitivity, she is managing to control that beast, not using force to control it, but compassion or sensitivity. I feel in the sense of being, this card is all about the acceptance of one's own animal energy. What do you do with it? What do we do with our animal energy? This animal energy can be the source of our greatest conquests and achievements, our greatest satisfaction in life. But it can also be our greatest downfall if it runs rampant and out of control. And we will see this in the Devil card later on. But for the time being, the lady here shows the way to handle, to deal with our wild side. Non-attachment to changing anything. If you look at her expression, it's quite serene. There seems to be no desire, no strong attachment. We had a talk at the Theosophical Society about 2 weeks ago on attachment, non-attachment. There's no strong attachment to a result. She's simply doing what she's doing, and doesn't really seem to be doing anything, because one hand seems to be opening the drawer, the other seems to be closing it. Yeah, it's quite paradoxical. She could be doing either. She could be helping the inner being, the inner wildness to release, or she could be keeping it under control, or whatever she's doing, she's very calm about it. No identity in being a helper. Very, very important. She's not doing it in any kind of proud, taming the wild beast in a circus way. She's just aware of a flow of help, of tenderness. There is tremendous awareness there, but there's no investment in the idea of achievement. And this is what this whole idea of being is all about. The subjugation of the ego. There's just an allowance of love to flow. Yeah? And as John de Ruyter says, I take my inspiration for interpreting this card from John de Ruyter, who is one of the Western teachers of enlightenment. There's a book by him. I attended his talks many times in the 1990s. He's from Canada. And his take on enlightenment, on being, if you will, is basically that it consists of honesty and surrender. Yeah? Honesty and surrender truly work. Yeah? And he says, if you can stay wonderfully open and soft inside, then you can deal with anything outside of you in any way you like. In other words, if you haven't got a goal, if you haven't got an expectation, if you just allow whatever wants to happen, it will be all right. No need for doing. The other quality in the early part of this cycle, this part of the journey, is the quality of surrender, which I just mentioned, according to John de Ruyter. And it really crops up most of all in this card, the Hanged Man. It's a rather frightful looking situation that this character's got himself into, the Pondu. First of all, it's quite significant that it's a man who's hanging, okay? In the last card, we had a woman who is incarnating the feminine presence, the feminine tenderness, which is what this journey is about. And here we have a man, somebody who is masculine and wants to achieve and get things done, and it's the man who is strung up and is now forced to wait, forced to surrender, forced to make a sacrifice, sacrificing his own male ego that wants to achieve and get things done. So very significant, I think, that it's a man. Also, that at the bottom of the card, what we've got there, we've got green. We've got green grass, we've got plants growing. All is not lost. Tarot is saying there is still hope, there is still growth. Where's the growth happening? It's happening inside, deep, deep, deep down inside, when one simply gives up. gives up the idea of doing and starts instead growing within one's depths. The card, or rather the situation, is the archetype, if you will, of blockage or obstruction, delays, obstacles, difficulties cropping up in our life. I've had a few living in London just with the transport system, particularly on a Sunday. You can never seem to get anywhere on a Sunday with very much ease. You have to kind of be patient, you have to change your route, you have to sit and do nothing, stay at home instead. This is all the situation of the hanged man, okay? Where you have to suspend all your furious wanting to do something. It also means constriction, yes, constriction, not expansion, constriction. Constriction of freedom, constriction of activity. If you're a person who loves moving around like I do, it's a very, very uncomfortable situation. Necessity of patience and self-sacrifice. Warm acceptance of non-okayness. I'm not a spiritual teacher, okay? I'm only giving what I'm giving you tonight because it's what I've heard. And I'm giving it for you and for me, to all of us to consider. But John de Ruyter says, and he's quite emphatic about this, that there is no substitute for okayness. And that okayness is not going to work unless it's warm. Yeah? It's no good tolerating an alcoholic husband for 10, 20 years of your life if you are furious about the situation inside. Okay? This is about warm and willing and perfectly being perfectly welcome to whatever it is inside. That is really making your life hell. Okay? And it won't be hell if you are actually warmly okay with it. This is a massive learning, maybe for all of us. Yeah? Allowing oneself to simply be, no matter what turmoil is going on around us, that there can be a still centre. The more you let go, the more you let things occur. So there is power in letting go, but it's a different kind of power to the magician's power, to masculine power. The author of that quote is Richard Bartlett, who's the pioneer of matrix energetics, which is all about tapping into the quantum field, which is the scientific term for consciousness. And in that field, we can experience miracles. You know, we'll be looking at the whole idea of this in the next few cards. If we have to go even further than letting go and waiting with patience and self-sacrifice, we often find ourselves at a complete dead end where nothing more can be done. And this is card number 13. Well, what do you know? This is one of the most unlucky, grim-looking cards you can imagine. Illustrations you can imagine for a deck of cards. It doesn't have a title on it. Now, I wonder why that is. Yeah, it's the only card in the major arcana in the Tarot of Marseille, which is the nearest to the original tarot. It doesn't have a name on it. I wonder why that is. These cards go back to, it's said that they go back to the 1300s, the Middle Ages, go back to, or even beyond that, to when Muslim, Christian, and Jew, they all lived in the same, lived at peace with each other. It's said that they were actually designed originally by the god Thoth in ancient Egypt. So these are descended along from, these have a very ancient tradition, these cards. And to the best of my knowledge, this card has never been named. I think it's only superstition because it's quite clear these days that it signifies death. But it's not simply physical death. If you think about it, death would not exist if we didn't have a physical body, would it? Would it? I mean, anybody who believes in spirit, you know, the spirit is eternal, is always alive, has to agree that no physical body, no death. Yeah? It's only the body that dies. Yeah. But the body is all that we've got in this material world, so we're pretty damn determined to hang on to it. So this situation of death means a lot to us. But in the Tarot, I think it is also referring to ego, and that the ego that wants to achieve, that wants to do. My reading of this card in terms of spirituality is that it's the end of the dream of self-identity. This dream that we do have a self, that we are independent to other people, and that we exist. I exist, even if nobody else does. I know I do. But it's the end of that dream, yeah? Because what am I? The ancient Hindus always asked the question, not the ancient Hindus, they may have done, but the modern teachers of Advaita and Enlightenment, they always started with the question, who am I? Who am I? Am I this mind? Am I this body? And what is it that continues after this mind and this body no longer exists? Because this is saying that for sure there is a grim reaper around coming for us. Maybe not for sure. Maybe it's only a belief. It happens to a lot of people that they have to give up the body. But it's also a clearance of memory and expectation. It's a release of the ego and attachment to being, being an independent person. It's quite significant, I think, that this card doesn't come at the end of the major arcana, because it's number 13, okay? And there's 22 cards in this profound section of the tarot. It's only number 13. So it's like saying, it's the death, if you like, it's the end, it's a radical transformation, but life goes on. Yeah? It happens in the midst of life. We are in death, as it says in the Bible. Release of ego attachment, illumination of self-identity, enablement of a new beginning. If we look at the illustration in detail, we can see chopped up body parts on a black, a rather doom, signifying background or ground, pure pitch black. But in this black, there is something growing, and it is the hacked up parts of the body, of our attachments, of our ego, replanted and growing, seemingly again. So what is this saying? In Theosophy, we say that death is not the opposite of life. Life goes on. Death is the opposite of birth. So the opposite of birth is death, and then after death, birth takes place again, rebirth. Death clears the way for a new beginning, for a new growth in ourselves, in our lives. Tony Parsons, the death of the mind, death of the body is only the ending of a journey in time. A journey in time and space, the material world journey. The story is over, and yet nothing has happened. For we are already the ocean, the waves, the darkness and the light, the nothing and the everything. So, beautiful. That's a kind of transcendence of this. And I want to finish the first half of this talk with the arrival at a state beyond death. So we're going into tea, in the afterworld, if you like, in heaven, having gone through the stage of dying or of releasing, and realizing that we've come to something that lies on the other side of duality. Because death, if we take death to be the end of the ego, the death of doing, then it is the end of our experience in mind and space. It's a beginning and an ending. It's the experience of us as a name with an individual personality. And this is symbolized, all these things I've mentioned are symbolized by the symbol you have there. Does anybody know what the symbol is called?
Tell.
Sorry? What?
Yin Yang.
Yin Yang, yes, it's the Eastern symbol of opposites, polar opposites that compensate for each other, called Yin and Yang. As you look at the symbol, you can see that where the darkness is greatest, you have the seed of light, new light appearing, and where the light is greatest, you have the seed of new dark appearing. Each one contains the other. Each one is dependent on the other. Light and dark, they go together. They cannot be separated in this material world. The same with all opposites. The same with everything. Everything, whether in time or space, has to be configured according to an opposite, according to a principle of duality or polarity. But as we just saw, Tony Parsons' quote, as we saw in the quote by Tony Parsons, the death of the body, the mind, is only the end of a journey in time. The story is over. So it's the end of duality. Now, what is this saying? Okay, yes, it's true. Duality must have an ending, because by its very own equation, there must be an opposite to duality. Duality says there's an opposite to everything in the world. But that also means there's an opposite to duality. And I find that incredibly significant. Duality itself has its own polar opposite. If such a thing can be imagined, can be thought to exist. And that is what I call being, with a capital B. Yeah? And that is going to launch us into the darkest, the most mystical part of the tarot. And we'll look at that in the second half of the talk. Thank you.
Just